KNES 560. This is your last little micro lecture, and short, sweet, to the point, giving you a little something to think about for your project. So I'm going to review, I'm going to walk you down the forces part that I want you to apply, but we're going to start from the beginning, not ridiculously too far the beginning, but Newton's laws in terms of the so what. So what? What's the application for us here? And the first law is the law of inertia, resistance to change in object's motion. You guys might have heard of it from the super ridiculously long definition. Object in motion stays in motion. Object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon, blah, 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 blah. The take-home point of this law, what makes it cool, is that objects can't move themselves. Literally. If you were in a weightless environment with nothing around you to influence you, you can't change your motion. Lay down on the ground with your feet and arms off the ground and start trying to run. Where are you going to go? Or if you're on slick ice, that's one reason why it's hard to move, because your environment, it's the environment that is having a tough time moving you. You're not having a tough time moving the environment is having a tough time moving you. Objects can't influence their own motion. Now, objects can feel forces from themselves, like if I push on my cheek, that's why I didn't say objects can't feel forces from themselves. I feel a force this way from my hand, but my hand feels a force back from my cheek. That's all part of the same thing. So my hand can't push me this way. Why? Because my cheek is trying to push my hand that way. Poof, they cancel out. That's Newton's third law. But that's why objects can't influence themselves. It takes other objects. It takes other things outside of our system to actually influence us. No different than why do cars get stuck more in the mud? Because the environment is tougher to move the car. It's the environment. Why is it tougher for soccer players and football players to get traction and move on a wet, slippery, muddy field? The environment. Okay? So the reality is you're trying to move the environment, but most of the time the environment ain't going anywhere. So the environment, therefore, transfers all that energy back on you. When the environment is muddy, sandy, slippery, you actually move the environment. Your energy actually moves the sand, and therefore the sand doesn't give back more to you. That's Newton's third law. But the first law, objects can't move themselves. So if objects can't move themselves, influence motion, speed up, slow down, speed you up, slow you down, move you. Change direction is actually speeding up, because if you're going this way and then all of a sudden you change direction, remember vectors, then you sped up that way. And technically you slowed down a little this way. So change direction means speed up in a different direction. So Newton's second law is the continuation of Newton's first law. That's how I like to look at this. Second law is a continuation. First law says objects can't move themselves. Second says, okay, well then what can move them? And the answer is other objects, outside influences. Things outside of that system can influence the system. And we have a name for outside influences. We call those things forces. So there's a lot of different outside influences. There's pushes and pulls and frictions and gravity and all these different but it's all influences that are trying to change objects' motion, other objects' motion, not themselves, outside. So an example, hey phone, what's trying to influence your motion? It's like counseling. Hey phone. Well, I guess that's a good analogy. Hey phone, tell me what's trying to change you. Tell me about your mother. Tell me what's trying to change you. And the phone's like, okay, I feel this downward influence. Something's trying to pull me down. I say, wow, phone, that's a great point. That is the center of planet Earth that's trying to bring you down to it, not the ground. If I snapped my finger Harry Potter style and there was a 3,000-mile hole that opened up and I dropped the phone, it would go through the hole because the ground isn't pulling, it's past that, literally the center of this planet. Okay, that's the center of mass of planet Earth. So the phone tells me I feel this downward pull on me by some other object. The phone isn't pulling down on itself. And then I say, well, that's pretty cool, phone. Well, what's keeping you from going down to meet the center of the earth? And the phone's like, dude, your hand? Ah, okay. So you feel an upward push from my hand, a compression force, a push. The phone's like, yeah. Now, some of you may have heard normal force and all those things. We're just going to keep it simple, man. Pushes, pulls, gravities, frictions. So the phone's like, yeah, dude, the planet's trying to pull me down, but your hand is stopping me from going down by pushing up. And we call, when we actually draw that out, we call that those free body diagrams, where I would actually draw the phone free of my hand. I would just draw a line to represent the phone. Now, it's not that my hand isn't there. I'm going to represent my hand's push with a vector arrow that says my hand is pushing up on the phone. And then I'm going to draw a little downward arrow from the planet Earth pulling down on the center of mass of the phone. So the objects are there in representation with force vectors, meaning that the phone feels a push from my hand this way. The phone feels a pull from the center of the Earth that way. Well, Dr. Campbell, why don't we just draw the hand in the phone? Because then it gets confusing. Because if you actually have the hand in the phone, who's feeling what? Is this gravity negative y vector? Is that the hand feeling a push from planet Earth? And is this upward push, is that a force push from the hand, right? So each object has to be indivisible by itself so that we can literally see all the different forces feeling it, okay? Second law is a absolute brilliant cause and effect. External forces from other objects influence objects' motion, other objects' motion. F is equal to ma. M literally stands for the object you're looking at. In this case, it would be the mass of the phone. So outside objects' influences, forces, are directly proportional, that's what the equal sign means, the phone's potential change in motion. That's what acceleration is. Acceleration is change in velocity, meaning you changed your motion. F is equal to ma. Unbalanced forces are directly proportional to the mass of whatever object you're looking at, the ball, the bat, the U, times that object's potential change in motion. If there's no change in motion, that's an easy equation. 0 times whatever the mass of anything is 0. The sum of all the different forces must also be 0. We call that balanced or static system. An accelerating object we call a dynamic system, meaning that there's some unbalance in the forces. Star Wars reference joke. But to make this phone change its motion, something has to be greater than something else. Think of it like this. If you get a bank statement every month, you may have spent, let's say you have $100 in your account and you spent $500, but you brought in $500. Well, that's balanced. You're still going to have $100 in your bank account. If you spend $550 and you brought in $5, there's going to be a change. Your bank account accelerated a certain way. In this case, accelerated down. If you brought in 5,000 and you spent 500, it accelerated up. There was a change. Okay, it's that simple. Now we get to the third law, which is a continuation of the second. Newton's third law says, okay, all the different forces, the sum of all the forces is directly proportional to the potential change in motion of the mass of this object. F is equal to ma. But you know what? Now Newton, this is all Newton, man. Newton was brilliant back in the day. Now it's kind of like, duh. But for Newton, in Newton's era, that was like really amazing. What Newton realized, he said, if this phone feels forces, influences from two different things, in this case, it feels influence from my hand, literally push from my hand, and it also feels a non-contact pull from planet Earth. This phone feels two main things influencing it, two main objects. That brilliant son of a gun said, well, that it's impossible for those two things, those two objects, to not feel the phone back. That's what Newton's third law is. Action, reaction, that's because action infers motion. Like you think about a director filming a scene in a movie, and action, that means go. This phone ain't going anywhere. It's force counterforce. If this phone feels influential forces from two objects, those two objects got to feel that phone back in the same exact magnitude, but in opposite direction. That's what Newton's third law is. If the phone feels a positive push from my hand has to feel a negative push from the phone with the same exact magnitude, opposite direction. How does this apply to our bank account analogy? Super simple. If I write a check to you for $200 and that transaction goes through, it's the same exact amount. It's impossible for me to write you a check for $200 and me, just opposite direction, for me not to lose $200 and you not to gain it. Same exact amount, opposite direction, and two different objects in the transaction. It's a transaction here. What does the phone feel from the transaction? What does the hand feel from the transaction? You see how one transaction has two different things affected by it, with the same exact amount of effect, just opposite directional effect. Let's go to planet Earth, because the phone feels a negative pull from negative Earth. I felt like a Backstreet Boy right there. Tearing up my heart when I'm with you, and when we are apart, I'm on the moon. You know what's going to be in a few days? It's going to be May. Stop, Brian. The phone feels a negative non-contact pull from the center of planet Earth. So Newton's third law says it is impossible for the center of the Earth, 3,000 miles down, there is a little bitty upward pull from the phone. Is it significant? No. Does the Earth feel it? No, but it's there. It is there because it has to be there. Why does it have to be there? Well, let me give you an analogy from my oldest son when he was a youngin'. He was afraid of ghosts at the time, very common. He's also highly sensitive and autistic, and so these kind of fears get expressed exponentially. And so he was having trouble sleeping, and so I was trying to talk him through it. And I said, what are you afraid of? He's like, I'm afraid a ghost is going to come in the middle of the night and get me. Because the doors are locked, right? So a burglar can't get in, but a ghost can and go through the walls. I said, so what are you really afraid of? Like the ghost is going to like get you. He's like, well, yeah, the ghost could like come and like get me. And I said, well, if the ghost can go through the wall, the ghost could just go through you and you won't even notice it's there. How can it mess with you if it's just going to go through you? He's like, no, Dad, you don't understand ghosts. He's like, the ghost can go through the wall, but it can get you. And I was like, all right, well, if a ghost grabs you, then just smack it in its ghost face, and he's going to respect that, and you're going to scare him off. And he's like, Dad, you don't know how ghosts work. A ghost can get you, but you can't get him. And that's when I laid down Newton. Son, It is impossible for the ghost to touch you, to physically touch you, and you not touch him back. How is it possible for you to touch the table and the table not touch you back? How is it possible for you to touch the phone and the phone not touch you back? And he's like, Dad, can I have a glass of milk? And I was like, yes, you can have a glass of milk. That's Newton's third law. If you're doing a vertical jump analogy or project, and you are the object, the only reason you feel upward push from the ground is because the ground feels downward push from you. That transaction has to be equal and opposite. That check for $200 has to be equal and opposite. You have a transaction with the ground. You and the ground are doing business, and business might be good as you go up in the air. If I was doing that business would be bad. Maybe like I wouldn't get up very high. But I'm old, get off my lawn. So that's what it's about. So if you're doing a shot put, all I'm asking you to do is tell me, what does the shot put feel? What's it feeling? Well, center of the earth, push from your hand, and then if you want, you could get into, well, the push from my hand is going to be up and it's going to be across, because I'm not just going to push the shot put up, right? And then you could say, well, the reason the shot put feels this from my hand is because I'm feeling this resistance back from the shot put. Equal and opposite. Equal and opposite. Okay. Now, if you say, well, if it's equal and opposite, how does the shot put ever accelerate? Well, because what the shot put pushes back on you doesn't affect the shot put. That's affecting you. If you're super weak, maybe I don't push the shot put very hard because its influence back on me is very significant. But if I'm 6'4" from Norway and one of those strong men, that shot put is literally like this softball. And so really it's the force I'm giving the ball as a function of the ball's mass. In the X direction, because there's nothing else resistance. In the Y, it's going to be being more imbalanced in the weight of the ball, the center of the planet influencing the ball. That's what it's all about. There's your unbalanced force. So that's what this last little micro lecture is just getting into, if you're doing a vertical jump, you feel this, ground feels that. If you're doing a standing broad jump, you feel this in the up and down, obviously in the up, but my point is that when you go up. But if you go across, what's making you go across? If you jump in this way, friction from the ground. Now, this plus this equals that, your resultant. So ultimately, the resultant force, the so what force, is going to push you this and that, just like the shot put. But that resultant is made up of a normal force, a compression force, and a friction force, a micro compression force, micro push. Everything's biomechanics. I joked with my major professor the other day. I said, even exercise physiology, that's micromechanics. She thought it was funny. So if you have any questions, let me know. Ultimately, now you can talk about forces. But when you do talk about forces, make sure to talk about from what, from who, who's feeling it, what is the ball feeling, what are you feeling, what is the javelin feeling, what is the weights feeling, right? So if I'm doing an exercise and I have dumbbells in my hand and the object I'm looking at is me, make sure you include those dumbbells. Those dumbbells are supplying a downward push on me. And the reason they're supplying a downward push on me is because those dumbbells feel a downward pull from the center of the planet or the earth. All right, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Be well.